After the recent storms across Ohio, it may be a long, hard walk across the field, but a necessary one to figure out how damaged your crops might have been from the wind or the hail. Troy Putnam with DuPont Pioneer recently made that walk himself.
At this stage of the game, we're looking at the plant. We're looking at the what's left in the field. You can see that these plants were flowering. They were at what I would say an R1, R2 stage. And we've determined that the plant has got its integrity down low. There's no breaking or bending of the stalk. I would expect for these plants to recover, and once we determine that, then we can look above ground here and look at what's left. And every one of these little locations on the plant is called an axillary bud. The plant can regenerate from those buds, can regenerate its growth, can develop trifoliates, and do its best to recover. A soybean plant at R2, which these things were not quite at R2 yet, the guys want to know, what's my yield loss? And that's very difficult to forecast or to say today. A soybean plant at R2 that takes a 50% defoliation by the books would be looking at a 6 or 7% yield hit. The confounding factor that we have in this part of the world this year is not just a hailstorm, but the tremendous heat that we're experiencing. While I think these beans will recover, it's very difficult to determine what the yield loss is going to be. But my advice to this grower would be to just kind of sit back and wait and watch for the regenerative regrowth of these plants and expect a recovery with what's left in the field. Right here is where the cotyledons were once attached on this plant, and as we assess the health of this plant, if we have damage below where the cotyledons were once attached, whether the stem would be collapsed or severely damaged or have a huge dent in it that might allow that plant to collapse, that plant's essentially not going to make it. Everything that's going to regrow has to be above that point. Anything that's dead below that point will not allow that plant to recover. And this is where the cotyledons were once attached. And from that, if we're healthy above that, then I would expect the plant to go ahead and recover. If we have damage below that, damage more than just a little superficial scarring, which we see on this plant, then we'd have to question the integrity of that plant. But this plant, even though it's got a little damage right there, it's superficial, it's on the surface. I expect that plant to recover. The one thing we noticed about this field, and we're downwind at this point, is that there was a distinct smell of what you might categorize as silage in this field. And if you look down at the amount of foliage that's on the ground, this is not leftover fodder from the prior corn crop. This is actual green residue that's been beat down and tore up by the rain and the hail, and it does smell like silage out here. So it gives you kind of a feel for how extensive the damage was. And it's really hard at this stage of the game to make yourself believe that there could be a recovery in this field. You know, the other confounding factor that I have concern over at this point in the game is the intense heat that we have following this event. As with much of the Corn Belt, we've got extreme heat, we've got a lot of water deficit going on at this stage, and a good bit of that recovery and the amount of foliage that these plants will develop will be dependent on the continued rainfall and hopefully some relief in these temperatures.